We'll just be starting in 1 minute. Thank you for joining us, everyone. My name is Neil Blake. I manage the business for Axel in Europe. Today, we are going to be concentrating on some basic training overview for Axel. As you may know, that we have three main products in Axel. We've got the Axel Media Management, we have Connector, the workflow engine, and we have a Scribe, which is our transcoding tools for Premiere Pro. But today, we will be concentrating on Axel. This is not a memory test, so we are recording the event, so you'll be able to download that and access it later. And we also have a number of panelists online who can field your questions. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the session. And if we feel that it's appropriate to stop and discuss something appropriately or discuss something in depth, my panelist colleagues will let me know and we can do that. So here we go. As you all know, we help you find your content quickly, and that's the last marketing slide we'll show. But the whole point about Axel is being able to find what media you have, whether it's in a number of static drives on a shelf or in a cupboard, or hopefully on some shared storage. And the agenda for today is we'll do some introductions, which we'll do now. We'll look at Axel on a network. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and then look at what an Axel user is, so you understand a little bit about the access rights and permissions. We've got a slide on a new feature called reverse proxying, which is very important if you want to make Axel available on the internet. Then we'll look at the building blocks of Axel and then the user interface. Now I've got 3 or 4 slides in this PowerPoint for the user interface to act as an aide-memoire when you download the PowerPoint or the video, but of course we will be going to the live screen at that point as well. So there are a number of panelists here. So my name is Neil Blake. I manage the European division, as it were. We have Sam Bogosh, our CEO online, Patrice Gotebel, our senior product manager, Alex Hamilton, who runs the sales for the Americas, and we've got Katie Scott, who basically runs everything else. What I normally, or how I normally introduce Axel to a client is we have Axel here sitting on a Mac Mini, for example, or a Mac platform with some shared storage. We have a network. Then we have our first layer of users on the network. I normally put the editors closest to the storage in this drawing because they need to know where the content really is. They need to know the file paths. The next layer of users are maybe non-technical. It might be the marketing department or a PR department or a production department. They don't really need to know where the content is stored. They just need to be able to find it and make creative decisions. So it could be creating short lists that the editors would then access and download and import into the editor. Then we have the idea of external users. And I've got 2 slides. I've got another slide to talk about the external users, which we'll look at in a moment. But for example, if there is a user working at home, which is quite common these days, you could provide a VPN access to the network. So a user is online in the network as if they are in the office, and they can log in with their username and password. The other way that users can see content is via a shared link. And this link is an encrypted link which is emailed to what we call a guest. A guest does not take up a username or a password, and the guest will only see the content that has been shared with them. The idea of named users, and that's how we license and price Axel's standard systems. For example, you could have 5 users, you could have 10 users, or 50 users, or something. Each named user, and we can see an example here, can see certain content, the accessible folders, and then these users have appropriate permissions for these folders. And also we have the main user rights as well. So we can see that the user James here can see 3 catalogs from the system. And in this particular case, because this is a screen grab, the user has complete control over the Audi Racing folder in this case. The user James is not an administrator, so the user cannot come into the admin pages and start modifying the system. And this is somewhat similar to the user John. You can see that John can see slightly different content. This blue house that we can see here is the home page. When a user logs into Axel, they will land on the same page every time, and that's set up by the administrator. So that's a home page. So they always have consistency. We can see that the user permissions are slightly different between James and John. And without going into too much detail, this is where we set up what the user can do. And this particular configuration is very useful for a new user. Seeing previews is the absolute minimum function that a user can have. They can search for content and they can view it, but they basically cannot do anything else. I'll come back to upload and download. The posting comments and changing metadata would allow the users to add comments or markers in a time and via in regard to timecode on the source, and then we have file-based information. That's the metadata. Managing and editing is things like renaming files, moving files, copying files, and creating new folders. We would typically suggest leaving these off for new users so they don't start moving content around. And we've got file approval as well, so that's our traffic light system. Again, the user John is not an administrator, so they can't come into the admin page just and make changes. And one last user to give you another example. We've got the user Neil. This user is an administrator, and this user can see more content in the user interface. So anything that's listed here will be available in the general user interface for the people. The other boxes we've got up here, I'm not planning to cover in any particular depth during this session. If you change a user configuration, you must click on Save here. If you have a lot of users, you can actually save templates for a user configuration. So, what folders are accessible, what permissions are set for the particular user, and then you can apply that to a new user, or you can apply it to multiple users, which makes setting different users up quite quick. This slide is regarding a new service that we've got called Reverse Proxy. And that allows you to securely set up Axel on the internet, as it were. It means that you don't have to open up your network to external users. And what the reverse proxy does is it puts the Axel user interface, and only the Axel user interface, from the main server onto a secure cloud-based server. And this is the server that the external users would log into. They will see absolutely no difference whatsoever from logging into the system as if they were on the network. And you can also set up your own URL to allow them to access the system using a personal URL. So, for example, on my European demo system, I have email.axel.ai. and then any client in Europe can simply just log in using eme.axel.ai and then the username and password that I set up on their system. So it's a very secure way of having Axel on the internet. Axel itself is made up of a number of blocks. So the Axel and then this system has FFmpeg to start with, PostgreSQL for the backend database, and Elasticsearch. The important thing here is we're not doing anything proprietary. We're not locking the storage down. We're not forcing you to check content in or out to be able to use it. And it's a very light touch on the storage. We touch the original high res files to create the browse copy, and that's basically all we do with the shared storage. There are a number of modules also within Axel, and again, I'm not going to go into detail with these during this particular session, but if you do need particular additional functions, there may be a module required, and that would provide these services. Any of our modules can be added at any time to an Axel system. So you don't have to worry about adding them at the point of installation. You can add them at any time. And I've got a few slides of the user interface. And this is mainly to allow you to go back and review what the interface looks like if you don't have access to an Axel system. And I'll go into more detail about the different areas when we're looking at the live system. But basically we have our catalogs or our folders down the left-hand side. We've got our content in the middle, and then on the right-hand side, we've got our file and metadata information. I'll talk about the top two lines live. We automatically create the browse copy and the thumbnail for every clip that we find, and we have a light and a dark theme available for Axel. And we also have, of course, a player window if you were to select a player. And this is a standard HTML5 player. So again, it will work on any standard browser. You don't need to have any special software or anything to connect to Axel. Just open your favorite browser and you access Axel via the IP address of the machine. We're presenting the original timecode from the original clip in the player window, and everything is referenced back to the original clip as well, of course. There are a number of tabs under the player window, and everyone will have comments and subclips in their system, assuming that you have permission to add comments and also have access to the bins. And then the additional tabs that are showing here is because I processed this particular clip with our Microsoft AI interface. And that did things like identify the fact it was a street scene, there was trams in it, there was people in it, it was outside, for example. And we've got our metadata, and we'll go into this in much greater detail on the live system. So what I'm going to do now is switch over to the live Axel here, and just going to press another button on the other side so I can see it. So we have our login screen. You can change the logo on the front end to be your logo, so it's a bit more personal. And then I'm just going to log in with my Axel username and password. As I mentioned before, we have a home screen where we land, and in this case, the Amsterdam catalog is my home screen. And we can see when I've moused over it, we've got a little pop-up there saying 54, so that means there are 54 items in this particular catalog. And as I select different catalogs, we can see that the media is completely different in these catalogs. We present exactly what we find on the storage platform. So if there are multiple subfolders, these will also appear in Axel, and they will be available either on the left of the display here, so I can jump directly to a particular folder inside a catalog, or I can jump to the catalog itself and then move into the folder. Just above the catalog area, I've got what we call our breadcrumbs. This is showing me the folder path that I'm currently in. And this is very useful, again, if you've got multiple subfolders and I want to jump back to a folder, maybe 2 or 3 layers above where I am. What we've also got here, we've got access to our bins, which I shall come back to. Of course, in media management and post-production terms, a bin is not trash. A bin is a collection of clips. So I've got a collection of clips here from, in this case, Amsterdam. And we've also got some filters. These are very useful for finding content, in this case, new content today. Now, I don't have any new content, so the fact it's come up with nothing is I have added no files today. In fact, I haven't added anything this week, but I have added a number of files in the last few weeks. So in this case, files this month, I've added 129 files there. And I can also filter files that have been approved, and we'll talk about that again in a second. So I've got the approval system, which is a traffic light system. So red is approved. Sorry, red is not approved, green is approved, and yellow is under review. And I can also see that very clearly on each clip within a catalog. I have permission to change the approval rating, so I can simply do that here by selecting it, and we can see that there. The users can also save their own filters, which we'll look at in a moment as well, and that would appear underneath the smart filters. Some of the icons we can see on the screen here. So we've got the clip here. I can scrub through the clip simply by just pushing the mouse across it here, so I can see what's in the clip without having to open it. I've got a selector icon here, so I can select the clip in order to control it. And by selecting it, we can see that some things are changing over on the right-hand side. So this is displaying information for the clip I have selected. So in this case, all the file information and also the metadata information for that particular clip. The other thing that's changing along this top row here is a new menu is appearing. Now, one of the really cool things about Axel is there are only 2 user menus that a new user has to learn. One of them is the cogwheel here. The contents of the cogwheel, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through every single one. Hopefully, most of these are very self-explanatory. The contents of the cogwheel are based purely on the user permissions. So this may vary greatly for each user in the system. The contents of this menu will also change depending on what I'm doing or where I am in the system as well. And again, we'll show you some examples of that too. The other menu that a user has, if I select this clip, or if I was to open the clip, these 3 dots appear. These dots are my action menu. And these are functions related to the individual clip, or if I was to select multiple clips, the multiple clips here. So, for example, renaming a file or copying a file or sharing files. So again, we'll look at some of these in a bit more detail. But if I did select multiple files, I can control them at the same time there. And I've also got select all if I wanted to do something with all the files on a page. For example, if I wanted to add metadata to all the files at one time, I could easily do that. And I've also got deselect here as well. So that's the 2 main menus here. Just while we're looking at this area, the other icons we've got here, the little eye icon is our information icon, and that allows me to hide the information field here. So if I wasn't particularly interested in that and I just wanted to concentrate on the clips, I can just hide that. The other icons, I've got list view here, so I can switch between icon view and list view. I typically demo and show on the internet the icon view because it looks pretty, but virtually every customer I've met and spoken with uses list view because I can come in here and then I can start to modify the columns that are actually on display. So if, for example, if I went to detail here, I can actually start to look at the detail there. So that's in list view, and then I use the plus button there to make changes to what I'm actually viewing here. That also means, as with any list type of view, I can then start changing the sort order of the clips here, so by file name or by detail or modification date or anything here. And as I switch back to icon view, that sort order is retained, which is quite useful. The circle here is a rescan circle. Now there are two rescan circles on a web browser. We have our page refresh and we have our folder refresh. This icon will ask Axel to rescan the folder that we're currently in, to check for new files. Occasionally, you may need to refresh the browser. An example of that is if an administrator adds a new metadata field or maybe changes the order of a metadata list for a user, that user would then have to refresh the browser to get the changes to update in the browser there. So that's the icons here. So I'm just going to open a clip. So this is our player window. We can see here that I've got some arrows and I've got 50 of 54. So that's just telling me that I've got 54 clips on this particular page. I happen to be sitting on clip number 50, and I can step between the clips there rather than coming out of the player window to select a different clip. We have our player. I can control the player with the keyboard, so I can hit the space bar, or I can use the J, K, and L keys, or I can just click on play here. The three triangles I can see are my markers, or in Axel we call them comments, but if you're used to using Premiere Pro, you'll understand them as being markers. Anything that we add here will transfer across to the editor when we do a bin export. You know, the doorway and the door and the 34 would transfer across to the editor as when we do a bin export. We're picking up the real time code here from the original clip. The two bracket icons are my in and my out points. The markers or comments can be on a single frame, and I can get to them by scrolling down, or they might be on an area there. So, for example, if you had an interview, you may have the start and the end of the interview question. You may have the start and the end of the interview answer, or the answer to that particular question. And I simply select the starting point for the comment, and I can click on the bracket icon, or I can press the I key. I can scrub further forward here and then press the O key here. And what I'll do is I'll just type in Windows. So I'm adding a comment called Windows, and I'll just post that. So now that is in the system, and that instantly becomes searchable. And we can see the user who has added it and when they added it and what particular time they added that there. And as I say, every word of the comments is searchable. We'll come back to subclips in a minute. What I'd like to do now is look over on the right-hand side for the details of the file. So we have a number of different areas here. We've got our file information. So this is just standard information that we've pulled from the file. So the name of the file, the size, the frames per second, the duration, and the time code. Basically, Axel will support virtually any frame size, so standard definition, high definition, UHD, and also virtually any frame rate as well. So, I mean, I'm running 25 and 50, of course, because I'm over here in PAL land. But of course, it will run with 23.93 and 24 and 30 and 60 or whatever you happen to be shooting, and that's just reported there. The metadata here is very useful area. Now we've got a number of metadata fields. Before I look at the custom fields, which is the interesting bit, I'd just like to point out the technical metadata. Most of our customers completely ignore the technical metadata, but it does have a lot of possibly useful information regarding the clip. So, for example, it may have details of the bit rates, the codec type, the timecode information, and things like the frame sizes. So I've got the frame width and frame height here. I've got the bit rates there. And that, again, is searchable. So if I wanted to search for something like that, as I say, a lot of our customers completely ignore that. What they are interested in, though, is the custom metadata. This is the metadata that we would help you as the client to construct. And every client has different requirements for their metadata. And additionally, the metadata in one catalog can be completely different from the metadata in a different catalog. So different projects would, of course, have different metadata fields or metadata schemas. So you would design that for the particular project you're working on. So again, we'll select this here. And again, there's some examples here of my metadata. We've got free text fields, which means I can literally just type in anything here. And in fact, I've got a couple of text fields here that I've just used. I've called them different names, but they are literally just free text fields. And I use the different name titles to help me search for content later on. We have a number of preset fields. I've got a drop-down field here. Now, in this case, these are all preset by the system administrator. But a system administrator can easily add new information or new selections, or they can also remove old ones as well. So I can just select that, and again, that becomes searchable. The checkboxes, that's just a true and false, on off. So again, I can search for that. In this case, there's no canals in this picture because it is just a street scene, so I would leave that off. And if I was really struggling with being self-isolated, I can then start looking up the canal names and putting the real canal name in there. This is another example of a preset field. This is radio buttons, and we can select one of these again from a list of preset details. Actually, I've got one more type of preset field that I'd like to show you just before I go on, and that is in my car field here. We have another preset field. In this case, it's called tags. Again, the admin selects what is going to be visible to the user, but in this case, the user can select more than a single item. So that then means anything that is selected becomes searchable there. And again, I can save that, and that would then become searchable. And we can see here that I've got a different drop-down menu for Audi here, and I've got front-wheel drive there or whatever. And again, that becomes saved and becomes searchable the moment I press save. So even if another user is waiting for me to add metadata, the moment I hit save, it becomes searchable. And we've also got other, I've got multiple fields there, multiple text fields. And you can have as few or as many text fields as you like, or metadata fields as you like. And you can also change the sort order of the metadata fields. Excuse me one second. So the metadata that are most important to the users are on top, and we'll look briefly at that later on. Otherwise, the metadata would be laid out alphabetically. So if I had some metadata that maybe hasn't been modified, let's see, under Audi here, that again, I've changed the sort order of this, but we've got Audi car type there and car color. So if you have multiple words, again, it will sort it alphabetically. In this case, I must have changed the sort order for that again as well. Where we can also have files that have fixed sort order, and other files or other metadata fields that may have the same sort order, and again, they would be sorted alphabetically within this list. But again, that's probably too much information. But the layout of this and the way that the content is delivered to the client or shown to the client is very important. So we've added some metadata. I want to then start to search for content, which is the whole point of what we're doing here. And what I'm going to do here is go up to our top area here. Now, we've got two types of search. We have simple search, which is the search box here, and we've got advanced search as well. And we can have complex advanced searches, and we can easily zero in or narrow down a search very quickly. For example, we've got a client in London, and they have hundreds of thousands of files, but their metadata is so good that they can zoom in to a single file in about 3 seconds, just because they can really carefully pick what they're looking for in terms of metadata. What I'll start with, though, is I'll start with a simple search. I'm in the Amsterdam clip here, so I'm just going to type in tram. And it's found me some files here. I can still add more keywords into the search to narrow the search down. I think when I get to maybe 3 clips, I could probably figure out which one I want, because I can still move across these and see what's inside them before I go off and do something. And also I can see the approval rating of the clips, so I can see for some reason that this one has been rejected, so there might be something wrong with the content in there. But I can go off and do something here. Thinking back to my main user menu, I mentioned earlier that the contents of the user menu changes in different areas of Axel. So here we have a very good example of the content of this now is completely different from before. I can create a new bin, and then I can start adding clips from the search to the bin. Or what I want to do in this case is I want to save this particular search, because this is something that I'm interested in. So I'm going to click on Save Search here. And I'm going to give it any particular name. I'll just call it Neil's Search, or Neil's Great Search. And I'm just going to save that. Now that will appear under my filters there, and that is just for me. It's storing what I'm looking for, not what I have found, because the search results may change on a regular basis depending on what other users are doing with the metadata. Another key point about the simple search. When I use a simple search, it searches through absolute everything I have permission to see. It searches through all of the folders. It searches through all file names, folder names, all of the custom metadata, all of the markers, and also all of the technical metadata. So it's searching through absolutely everything. So if I was to say, let's do a search for R8, for example, for the cars here, for example, you can see that it's come back with 20 files. Some of the files have nothing to do with the cars. So in this case, again, I would want to narrow the search down quite dramatically to to find the search. So just bear in mind when you're doing a simple search that the scope of that particular search is very wide. The other type of search is my advanced search here. Now, the cool thing about this is I can restrict it to a single folder. So now it's only going to look inside Amsterdam. Then I can start to pick what I'm looking for. So for example, if I type detail, I could have also scrolled down there. So I can first of all just scroll down through my metadata. That's actually taking quite a bit of time to find the one I want. So what I want to do is I'm just going to start typing in the metadata field that I want to search for. Now I've got a number of Boolean type expressions to find what I'm looking for. So I want to say contains, and I'm going to say tram. We can see it's actually come up here with tram as a suggestion. And I'll hit search there. So now we can see that we've got a number of clips here that has tram in that detail. And if I was to pick one here, we can see that we've got detail there. We can see also that I've got back to search results. If I do open a particular clip here and view it and think, no, that's not the one I was looking for, I can simply go back to the search results and then pick something else and look at that. So I can continually go backwards and forwards between the clips I have selected and the clips that I'm looking for. And again, I can go back there. I can also very easily say minus detail trams. So that's basically turning it into not trams. So it's now found every clip in the Amsterdam folder that does not have trams in it. So I've got that there. And I can still come in here and add more keywords. So I can narrow the search down some more and find something there. So the advanced search is very powerful, and then I can mix additional keywords in to the search results from that. And if I was going to come back here and just say canals, canals was in this case a checkbox. So when I do a search for the canals, it is literally just find me canals that is true. And again, that will find me a number of items there, and I can go off and do something with that. And that's the most important thing to remember is using the simple search. You can just enter a single keyword or multiple keywords. So again, if I just come back to trams and bike, I can find that there. If I go to before the bike and say minus, it will find me everything with trams and no bikes. And you can see that the results have now changed again. I can just remove that and come back to what I had before. And I can do the same with trams as well. So it's going to find me everything with bikes and no trams. And we can see that I've found a number of clips there. And then I can go off and do something with them. And of course, the metadata is also searchable. So for example, we can see that I've got trees here as a marker. So if I come back to Amsterdam and then just type in trees, it's found a number of clips. Now again, it's come up with some clips that weren't in Amsterdam. You can see here, but we've got a number of clips that were in Amsterdam there. So let me narrow that search down again. Advanced search, restrict. I'm going to search for comments containing trees. And now we can see that as it's zoomed in, and it's come back with a completely different search because in some of the other Amsterdam files, it might have just been tree. And in the other metadata fields in the other catalogs, I had tree in there as well. So the advanced search becomes a very powerful tool for finding content really quickly. The next thing I'd like to have a look at is in fact, before I do that, are there any questions? And I assume that my fantastic colleagues are answering anything there regarding search. And we can also have a Q&A session as well. So moving quickly on, bins. A bin is a collection, and we've got a number of clips here. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to make a new bin, and I'm going to stick to the Amsterdam material, and I'm going to go to my main menu, and I'm going to select new bin, and I'm going to call it Neil AMS for Amsterdam. And if I look at my bin here, we can see that down here, and we can see the bin is completely empty. I want to then start adding some clips to a bin. So I'm just going to select a couple of things virtually at random, and I'm just going to come in here. We'll get it just as the cyclist goes out of shot, and then mark in all these people coming up. Now in this case, it's not a comment I'm adding, it's a subclip I'm adding, and I'm just going to call it street. The first time I select a bin, I need to choose it. Now the system will remember that I am working in the Neil AMS bin. So I'm just going to jump to another clip, and I'll just take it for the tram just before it comes into shot, and as it comes there. And of course, imaginatively, I'm going to call it a tram, remembers the clip name, and I'll just add one more clip here, and that's a particularly dull shot of the guy crossing the road. I don't think I've ever used that one before, and I'll just say person. So if I look at my bin now, we can see the three clips. We can see the areas that have been marked there relative to the whole clip. And now what I want to do is I want to export that as an XML. For any new user to Axel, if you're sitting looking at the screen going, I don't remember what to do, always look at the main menu. And this should give you help for what you want to do next. So I'm using Premiere Pro here. So I'm just going to say create Premiere XML. And we saw something happening in my downloads folder there that I've got in my dock. So I'm going to open up my Premiere Pro here. I'm going to go to my downloads folder and literally just drag the XML file into the editor. We can see that I've got my three clips here. I can open this, and if I was to zoom out here, we can see there's a marker there, and I can see the marker there. And if I was to zoom up and down here, we can see that we've got the in point and the out point there. When I'm using the XMLs are purely pointing the editor at the main storage and the main clip. So I'm using the high-res version of the clip here. And as I select different ones, we can see the different markers and the different in times and the out times there. Again, we're not going to cover using multiple formats or high-res, low-res workflows at this particular point, but if I wanted to do something like that, then I could use connector to create the browse style HD files from a 4K file if I wanted to, and then I can use Premiere Pro's rather cool toggle proxy high-res workflow there. The other way I can get into the editor is via my panel. Now this is a free panel. The panel is downloaded from the Adobe partner website, and it is under Windows, Extension, Axel. I'm using a local host machine, but typically this would be the IP address of the machine with Axel and the password, and I can log in. Because I'm using the same username, I'm seeing the same content. And I can then simply do the same search, tram and bike. And we can see that I've got these three clips again. If you remember, we had the three with the the different approval ratings. Here's my clip here, and then I'm just going to import that clip directly into the editor there, and we can see the clip, and now I'm using that clip. I can also import from any of the other catalogs that I have permission to see, and I've also got the ability to import entire bins. So I don't even have to leave the editor to find a bin within Axel and then start to import that bin, and then Axel and the editor will now be pointed to these particular files. And again, any in times and out times are marked, and all the markers are available there in that particular clip. And so that's importing the bins either by exporting from Axel or by importing directly from the panel. And there's not really an awful lot to say about the panel. It's very simple to operate. You literally either manually search for clips. You can undock the panel. I tend to have it docked, but we can undock the panel and have it on a second screen if you wanted to. If you had multiple screens, and I can come back home here so I can see everything in Axel there. And then I've got the standard search tools in Axel. So I can search for trams, bike, whatever, tree. And if I was to deselect that and trees, you can see again, it's found multiple clips in there, and I can find something and I can import it there. And we can see that we've got the clips, the markers there, and we've got that. And I'm just going to cancel for that, and I'm going to put just push that back in there. Okay, we've got 10 minutes left of our hour. Some of the other clips, we spoke about the smart filters. We can see that I've got my smart filter here, the one I created earlier. And if I selected that, again, the contents of that appears. I could then, if I wanted to, select that clip and add the clip to a bin. If I wanted to. In that case, what would happen is it would just add the whole clip with no in times and out times to the bin. So if I just do that, I'll just stick it into Neil AMS, and then I will look at my bin, and we can see here there's the new clip just with the original file name, so there's no subclip name, and we can see that the whole clip has been marked there. So I'll go back to Amsterdam there. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes just looking at the some of the admin tools. I'm going to go to the admin pages, clicking on the person's head here. Some of the other items in here, we can change the language of Axel. So all we're doing there is changing the user menus. So if I was running in Spanish or French or something, I can simply change it to that. And now all the user menus are in Spanish. For what I'm doing here, I'm just going to go back to English here. Because I am an administrator, I have access to the admin pages. So these are the pages that I looked at, or we looked at earlier, and we can see the users here. We can see that I've got the user James and the user John, the user Axel there. We can see that the user Axel is seeing more than the other users. I can easily add or remove visible folders for the user. So if I was to say I wanted to give some access to James for a new folder, I simply hit the plus sign. These are all the catalogs that I have in my system. So I want to give James access to my city media content. So I'll select that there, and then I would set up the user permissions for that particular user. So seeing previews, yes, you've got to have that or you won't see anything. Posting comments and changing metadata, yes, I want this user to be able to add metadata. and I want them to be able to approve files as well. I'll hit save. So now when the user James logs in, they will then see the city media content. The catalogs themselves are literally just file paths to storage. And if we look down some of these, we can see that I've got users shared. So that's actually on my system drive. I've got a volume Axel there. I've got a couple of catalogs on the same volume, but in different folders. I've got another external drive there, so that's on shared storage. That's shared storage. There's another one there, again, same volume, different folder. So Axel will manage all of the different catalogs in different paths on different storage volumes. We will continually check these different storage paths to ensure that any new files that are found are processed promptly. The data fields, we can select the folder or catalog that we're working in. So if I look at Amsterdam, because what I'll do is I'll switch back to Amsterdam, and we can look at the metadata here and compare it to what the administrator would see. The area above the line is how you enter new data. The area below the line is the content that's actually in the system, in the database, and is usable to the users. And we can see that I've got archive tape number, I've got canals here, and we've got the type of fields here. And that's very simple to select as I create a new field. So that a text box or a checkbox or a date field or whatever there. When you're setting up an Axel system, it's always best to start with a piece of paper and a pencil to work out the fields that you think the users will need, and what will make it easy for them to find content in a month's time or 2 months' time. What kind of fields will make it really easy for them to find content? And we can mix the different field types, and then we can change the order of the field types. So remember that I had location as the first field and detail as the second field. For some reason, what I might want to do is I might want detail to be the top, the first in the list. So what I'm simply going to do is just change that to a number lower than 5. So I'll just change it to 1 and then hit save. So now what will happen if I go back? Nothing has changed here because I need to refresh the browser. So it's not the folder refresh, it's the whole browser refresh that I'm going to do. And now when I select a clip, we can see that detail is now the top line and the location is the second line there. And it's not changing the metadata, it's literally just changing the way it's displayed there. In terms of drop-down menus or radio buttons or checkboxes or tags, when we start or create a field that's a drop-down, we then have to add values there. And you can easily add more values to a system, so you're not locked with the content that you've got to start with. And things like the shot type here, panning and static and tracking. Let's just say inverted, because I've got a couple of shots that were upside down. So I'll just add that as a new value. As quick as that, I come back here. Once more, I have to refresh. And if I select a clip and I edit the metadata, now we can see that we've got inverted there as a field type. And I can save that. If I wanted to select, if I did just go through this list and just visually select the clips that were maybe inverted, so let's say these two here, there, and the other one, I can now edit these two clips and just change that single field to inverted. I've got some dots here. These dots are telling me that there is metadata in both files, but it's different for each file. However, the important thing is the only thing that's going to change is this inverted field there. So if I was to come away from here, if I select something else, for example, I could then pick something. Let's just come out of that. I don't know why it's not letting me do that. Just refresh. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in inverted, and we can find our fields there, and we can then edit the content there, and we can see that it's that particular one is inverted, and this one again it's inverted there. And remember before that we had a different content, so we've got tram in that particular metadata field, I've got junk in that particular metadata field, and if I selected them both, we can see they're different. So that's us coming up to the hour. Is this a good time for me to pause and answer any questions? Let me pull up my panelists display. And what I'll do actually is I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint. And select the page there. So I believe that everyone is muted, but if you do have any questions just for the last few minutes, please just type them in and we can answer them. Everyone in Axel's email is very simple. It's always firstname@axel.ai. So if you don't get your question across or we don't have time to answer it during this session, please just email it to us and then we'll get back to you. If you'd like a one-to-one demo to answer specific questions in more depth, again, just contact Sam, Alex, or myself, and we can set something up. We can also provide access to my online demo system, which is the one at EME. So if I just quickly select that, I go off to my browser window. So it's EAME, Europe, Africa, Middle East, at axel.ai. And we can log into that. So this is using the reverse proxy field. And so it's going to the secure site, and then I can type in my username and password, and then I can log in. One thing I forgot to mention earlier when we were on the subject of logos, I can change the logo for each user. And so you would have the same logo for logging in, but then each user could have their own logo there just to personalize the system. And that's our reverse proxy system. And in terms of user functionality, it's exactly the same whether I'm on the network connecting to it or whether I'm connecting to it via the secure site. Yes, we do have a paper to talk about reverse proxy. That's actually something we would do for you. We would log into the system, install the widget that connects to the secure server, and then there's a choice. You can choose between using a URL from Axel. So it could be clientname.axel.ai, or if you had an IT team or you were able to create your own URL, we can use that as well. So we have a number of clients that have their own private URL that's pointing at their cloud site. I see a question there about importing Final Cut Server. We've done quite a large number of Final Cut Server imports. We would give you a tool to extract the database from Final Cut Server. Then we would have a discussion about the metadata you wanted to keep, whether there was any proxy files available in Final Cut that we could maybe look at reusing, and then we would migrate the database and the content into Axel. So we've done a number of these migrations.
Hey Neil, Patrice here. If you don't mind me interjecting, there is an additional question regarding the reverse proxying, which is basically what is the difference between setting up a reverse proxy versus doing a simple port forwarding through my router / firewall? That's a very good question. To the end user, there will be no difference. It will still be the same browser interface, it will still be the same access, and I will still be able to download the files from the browser. So if I have people working remotely, they need the high res or the low res for Roughcut edit, they can still do that. The main difference though will come in terms of security. On one hand, you have a service that is going to not expose your Axel server and your storage to the internet. And that's the reverse proxy. So we create a secure connection that is going to simply serve to a server somewhere the content of your Axel server. And your system stays secure behind your firewall. If you were to do a port forwarding or open your router to the internet, you suddenly expose your server and your storage to the internet and to potential attacks. So we prefer to actually be safe, and we strongly recommend that if you want to provide internet access to your Axel system, you either use a VPN, that is the most secure way, and you know who is connected and they have direct access to the network storage, or you use reverse proxying. That was it, Neil. And there is another question regarding the pricing, and I will hand it back over to you. Thank you.
So the pricing for the reverse proxy, we can send you some details about that. It's around about $600 for a year for the reverse proxy service. It's a subscription service, and you can also get it on a monthly basis as well. So you can buy 1, 2, or 3 months, for example, if you wanted to try it out. But typically it's an annual event. And as you can imagine, we've got quite a few users that are using reverse proxying because their staff are currently working at home in the current strange climate that we have here. But if you did want any pricing information, please feel free to contact us, and we can give you prices based on your particular requirements, along with any kind of modules that you may need as well. I'm just scrolling through here to see if there's anything else. We have recorded this. We will make the recording available to you to download, and we can also include the PowerPoint as well. We had too. And if there's any other questions, as I said, please just email them and we'll get them answered to you. So if there are no further questions, I'd just like to say thank you very much for taking the time to join us. We very much appreciate the time, especially at the moment with the difficult economic circumstances. And thank you very much.